Ty and Mitch here to talk about drugs and alcohol again.
Here to shed some light on drug addiction, alcoholism, and what rehab really looks like. We're going to jump right into it today, and Mitchell here does not know what we're going to talk about. I'm going to give him two options to pick from. He's going to decide which one we're going to go with, and then we're going to talk about that for the rest of our time here today. So, Mitchell, are you ready?
I am ready.
Okay, so option number one is we can talk about advice to people who are coming into rehab, and we can probably do that in two parts. Like we can talk about advice that we have for clients themselves, but then also advice for family members that are trying to help their family member get in. Or option number two is we can share our own significant personal experiences that we've had, kind of like some aha moments or like significant experiences that we had throughout our time in rehab.
Okay.
What do you think?
Option two.
You want to go option two?
Yeah.
Personal experiences?
That's more fun today.
Okay. Okay, we're going to get right into it then. You want to start? Or you want me to start?
Go for it.
Okay. We'll give you a minute to think about it.
Okay.
Okay, so significant personal experiences. Let me think back to the very beginning. You know what? I'm going to go as far back as when I was still in jail before I actually went to rehab. And because before I went to rehab, again, I went to rehab in 2016 and then have been clean ever since then. But I sat in jail for 2 months before I was able to get out into that rehab program. And I remember there was a guy that I was in jail with, and that time in jail, I got on to work in the kitchen. So I got to work in the kitchen.
That sounds like the best place to work in jail.
It was fantastic. It was like we would wake up at like 4 a.m. to go start getting breakfast ready, and we could just eat food whenever we wanted, but we would make all the meals, would start on breakfast, get that going, and then trade all up, and then it would get sent out to all the different blocks, and then that would come back, would work on lunch. We just did that all day. Would work like 3 days a week, 1 day off, 3 days a week, 1 day off, like whatever. It was great. But there was a guy that I was in jail with, and we worked in the kitchen together, and he became a pretty close friend. And he's the one that started telling me about rehab, and because he had been before, and I had already been introduced to the rehab program before, but when I got in there and became friends with this guy, he started telling me that he was planning on going there as well. And so he actually got released about a week before me, and got into this rehab program, and then I got released from jail about a week later and went into the program from there. And so having somebody in that rehab program that I already kind of knew, that was a friend of mine, and then we ended up staying together pretty much throughout our whole treatment experience. Like we were in residential together, we were in day treatment together, we went to IOP together, we were in sober living together, and he was just, it was nice having him there, because other than him, I didn't know anybody. Like I was going into a largely unknown.
It's like you're the new kid in school.
Yeah, I'd never been to rehab before, and so having him there was like, looking back on it, it was quite significant for me. And then as we were getting longer and longer into it, it was, it felt like, we were in the trenches together, and we were just kind of all in it together forever and ever. And I haven't talked to him in a minute. I see him on Facebook all the time. He married a girl. He's got kids now, and
good.
He's great.
That can be a good thing or a bad thing to have someone like that in treatment.
Yeah. So but for me, it was significant because like I feel like it's when you have somebody in there that can kind of makes you feel a little bit more comfortable, yeah. Because like going into a rehab situation where you don't know anybody, you don't know the rules, you don't know the processes or procedures, it's nice to have.
Yeah. And there could be cliques in rehab.
Yeah.
It's like high school sometimes.
For sure.
Yeah. Okay. When you said choose one of the two options, With the second option, something like immediately came to my mind as like one of the most significant moments in treatment. So it was this last time that I went through treatment in 2017. I had also just gotten out of jail, and it was one of those, what are they going to tell me that I don't already know, going into treatment. But I was like, I was willing to hear it. I was willing to, whatever you say, I'm ready. And the therapist that I had, she was the clinical director, and she had worked with me, and she, you do all the assignments that they kind of just give you, king, queen, baby, all that kind of stuff. Do your autobiography. I'm sure that some people would be familiar with that. But for me, she did something a little different partway into the program. She wanted me to define my values, like my personal values. And I was like, well, okay, that's easy, like honesty and integrity and, blah, blah, blah. But that wasn't true, because when I was out, using and drinking and, I wasn't living any sort of values. So I was just kind of defaulting to what I wanted my values to be.
Like the stereotypical school answers. For
exactly.
That type of question. Yeah.
And so that's what I realized. I realized that my values, I didn't really have any values. And if I did, I wasn't living up to them. So she had me figure out what was really important to me, which I hadn't really ever thought of before, because when you're down in it, you're like, wow, I just really wish that I had a place to live. And I wish that I had like a good friend. And I wish that my mom would pick up the phone when I called, And so she asked me to define what was really important to me. And it took me a while. It seems like it'd be an easy thing.
Just make a quick list.
Yeah. But I probably worked on that assignment for 2 or 3 weeks.
Dang.
And I had to start like at the very bottom. And so I had to figure out what was important to me by basically looking at how I had been living and thinking of the opposite of that value. So there's like good values and bad values, right? And so like if I would lie a lot. And so obviously the opposite of that bad value would be honesty, And so like I was at the bottom of the barrel of values and morals and integrity, right? And so I had to figure out what the opposite of what those were. And so by doing that, I found out what my number one most important value was, and it's still my most important thing today. And the number one most horrible feeling that I had when I was out using, drinking, lying, stealing, whatever, is a feeling of worthlessness. And anytime that I was, using people or using drugs or taking and never giving anything back, I always felt worthless. And I have several suicide attempts in, my history.
Yeah.
And every time, obviously, I was at a very low point and I just felt so worthless. And so that was like my foundation, my building point of like my whole recovery, really.
Yeah.
And so my number one most bottom of the barrel bad value is feeling worthless. And so for me, the opposite of that is feeling worth, right? And so today I want to live my life so that I can feel like I have worth to other people. And that's fine and great. But in order to have that feeling of worth, I have to have an action toward that. And my action that I have today to feel worth is service. And so service and feeling a sense of worth and purpose is like what I've built my entire recovery off of.
Why does service make you feel like you have worth? What is it about service that gives you that feeling of value?
Well, so I guess I had to do like kind of trial and error. When I first kind of started dabbling in this, I would like go to the gym, or like I would do like self-serving things. But it really wasn't, giving me that like my cup runneth over feeling. But it wasn't until I started helping others in their recovery, and it doesn't even need to be in recovery. And I work in recovery, and I wouldn't necessarily call that service, you know. But I'm active in other recovery type things. But it can also be, you know, if my dad needs help moving the fridge out of the house, you know, like I drop everything and I get there. And just getting out of myself and helping someone else where it doesn't benefit me at all, like that makes me feel really good.
Yeah. That's a fantastic story. And so you telling that story reminded me of my next one I'm going to talk about.
Let's do it.
So this significant experience for me happened at equine therapy. And if you don't know what equine therapy is, it's horse therapy.
I'm not a fan.
I love it. I love equine
I'm scared
therapy.
of horses.
I thought it was great.
They freak me out.
When I first heard that we were doing equine, I was like, I'm not getting on a horse. I ain't no cowboy. But we went to this lady's farm, and she had all this property. She had probably like 6 or 8 horses. I can't remember. But my very first experience with equine therapy, we all went there, and it was with a group of probably 8 or 10 of us or whatever. And one of the first things we did is she kind of had us sit down kind of around this campfire. She gave us all a piece of paper and said, okay, here's what I want you to do. On this side of the paper, just focus on one side of the paper. I want you to write down all of the things that you hate about yourself. And I was like, oh, we're starting off heavy. And I was like, this can't be good. And so she was like, no, put all your hate on there. Get all everything that you dislike about yourself, whether it's, you know, wrong things that you've done or ways that you've hurt other people, or just all the reasons why that you don't like yourself in certain ways or whatever. And so she gave us like 5 or 10 minutes. And so, you know, we all kind of go to our own little area, quiet place or whatever, and we write down all these things about ourselves that we just don't like. And, you know, I quickly filled up the paper just with all these things that, you know, regrets and everything. Right. And so she said, okay, now I want you to flip the paper over, and I want you to write down the very best version of yourself in 5 years from now, 10 years from now. Like, who do you want to be as a person? What do you want to be known for? Like, if you could describe yourself with the most perfect version of yourself in the future, what are some of the qualities that you have? What are some of the things that you want to be known for? That sort of thing. And so had 5 or 10 minutes, and we got to write down all that stuff. And so then she's like, okay, and all that like happened by campfire, had nothing to do with horses. And she said, okay, now I need a volunteer. And so of course I was like, I'll go. And so she says, okay, come with me. And we go through this gate and we go out into this pasture. And she said, everybody else, I want you to just watch for a second and just observe from afar, and we'll talk about it later on. And so she takes me out into the pasture a little bit, and these horses are just out grazing in this big open field. And she says, okay, here's what I want you to do. Read me this negative side of your paper and read me the whole thing. And so I read it to her, and this is just me and her standing there at this point. And
the other clients can't hear you?
Other clients can't hear me. It's just me and this equine therapist lady. And so I read all these things, and she says, okay, and how does this make you feel? And like, how long have you been doing this? And really just kind of twisted the needle a little bit and just like dug in, was like, okay, I want you to be that person. All of your negative, dirty, disgusting feelings, whatever, I want you to put yourself into this situation, and that's who you are right now. And your job is you need to go and you need to pick one of those horses out there, and you need to go and touch it. Just touch it, pet it, whatever. And so I was like, okay, I can do that. So I'm like all like aggressive and hyped up. I'm like, I'm gonna go touch this freaking horse. And so I start walking over there, and I'm just like kind of huffing and puffing, and I get kind of close to it, and I was like, I'm gonna touch this horse, you know. And I just like bolt, and I start running towards this horse, and I was like, I'm just gonna
running.
Yeah. And so I got as close as I could, and I took off, and I was like, I'm just gonna hurry and touch it and be done. And so I take off running, and this horse just splits.
Runs trying to like prove to the lady that you could just touch the horse no matter what and just be done.
I was sneaking up there. I got as close as I could, and then I was like, I'm gonna go for it, and I went in for it. And as soon as I moved, he just bounced and like to the other end of this pasture, right? And so I was like, now what? And like from afar, she's like, go touch it. You're not done until you touch that horse. And I was like, oh, okay. So I like kind of jog through this pasture and I try to get close to this horse. I'm like, I try to go touch it again and he was gone again. And I was like, do I have to keep doing this or whatever?
Everyone's watching me.
Yeah. And she's like, come here, come here. And so we went over and she's like, all right, let's read the other side of your paper. And so we flipped it over and I read all the qualities about myself that I wanted to be. And she said, okay, now you got to pick the same horse and you got to approach the horse with this mentality and go and pet that horse. And so I was like, okay. So I go start walking over to this horse on the other side of the pasture. And as I'm getting closer to it, I was a lot more like meek and lowly of heart and like kind and like soft. And I was like, come here, horse, come here. Like, come here. It's okay, buddy. Come here. And like sticking my hand out, trying to be friendly. And I walked right up to the horse and pet it on its freaking nose, you know? And I was like, I'll be damned. Like, what is this? You know? And so we went back and we all sat by the campfire and, you know, she was like, okay, so what you have to understand is that the way that you identify yourself comes out and it affects the people that are around you. And horses are like super sensitive to people and feelings and whatever. And so, and that's a whole nother topic for another day. But it was really cool because that really put into perspective, like, okay, here's all the bad things about me. That's not how I want to approach people, you know? And it was as simple as like changing your overall body language and demeanor and things like that. So that will always stick with me.
So yeah, I guess both of those stories are kind of similar in like, okay, who are you now and who do you want to be? Mm-hmm. So I think that's pretty cool because, I mean, you can apply that today. Yeah. Because I know that, like, if I'm going about my day and I'm having a crummy day or week or whatever, and I'm just like, I'm finding the bad and everything that's going on, you know, just because we have years of recovery and whatever underneath us in life is pretty good for us today doesn't mean that, like, everything's all great all the time. Yeah. And so whenever I'm having bad days, bad weeks, something isn't going my way, it's usually because I'm living out of the bottom of the barrel of my values and I'm being who I was and not who I want to be. Yeah. And you can just make that switch anytime you want. Yep. And, you know, we see everyone, every type of person come through treatment and recovery, and you can tell who's living what values and who's trying to change. And they're just completely different people, and they give off an energy. And sometimes it's, you know, like really bad, like, hey, you need to change something, or, you know, there's some that you just can't get enough of because they're just putting out love all the time. Yeah.
And I've said it once and I'll say it again, but rehab at its very, very core is all about behavior modification. And the quicker that somebody can learn that and start really trying to take notice of how am I coming across? How am I reacting to certain situations? How can I do it different or better? Like, do I act in anger? Am I giving off negative vibes to everybody? Am I complaining all the time? Like, just simple things like that. If you can learn how to change your demeanor, you know, you're going to start presenting yourself to the world in a whole lot more of a positive manner and get better results.
It was so much better reception. Yeah. And that's for anything in life. Yeah. Really. Yeah. So I can give another example. So when I was going through this last time, I was probably with every level of care in treatment, meaning like residential day treatment, IOP, for close to 9 months. But I had never done that long in treatment. And I remember when I entered in and I was like, you know, signing intake paperwork and stuff, I was like, hey, well, I'm just going to do residential. and I've done everything else, but I had never done all of it at once. You know, I'd jump into IOP or I'd do residential and then leave or whatever. So I had like this plan going into it, but things changed as time went on. And I remember, I went to pick up my 6-month chip and at an AA meeting, and I hadn't had 6 months since I was 17 years old or 16, I guess. And so I went in and I picked up my chip, and it was like such a big deal for me that like I cried, you know, because it had been like 10 years just about since I had that much time. You know, I'd pick up like, I'd do like the 30, 60, 90 day shuffle, relapse, get out, whatever. But it was like such a big deal. And so I remember as I was driving home from that meeting, because when I went into treatment, I didn't have a home, I didn't have a bed, I didn't have a vehicle, I didn't have anything. And so I was driving home from that meeting with my chip, and you know, I had a place to sleep, I was driving in a vehicle, and I had a job. I was like doing what I thought to be well in treatment because I hadn't relapsed, right? So I mean, that's pretty good. Yeah. And so and I was looking out, and there was like a sunset, and it was just like such a pretty evening. And I was like, I think I can do this. Like, that was the first time that, you know, I had just kind of been like in third person, like just do what they tell you to do. Doesn't matter. Yeah. Just march on. And that was the first time I felt like I had like a intrusive Mitch thought, but it was a positive one. It was like, maybe I can actually do this. You know, I hadn't been like craving like crazy. I hadn't been trying to do dirt or like do, you know, weird stuff on the side, or
and like it actually seemed like it could be a reality.
Yeah. Like,
and you could see the path
exactly
going, you know,
forward. I could finally see myself living without drugs and alcohol, whereas that had never been the case before. It was like, get out of treatment, get all my stuff cleared up, and then maybe I can start, you know, like just with a drink, you know, but for someone like me, that's not really a possibility. Yeah. You know, I'll have one drink and then I'm looking for cocaine or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was like a big moment for me.
Well, that's good. It's fun to see when other people have those moments, and like that moment happens at different times for everybody. Like, it can take up to a year, it can take a couple months, you know, and so it's cool to see when that light bulb actually turns on for somebody.
Riding the pink cloud, everyone rides the pink cloud. Then they get off the pink cloud and something happens, and they have those impulsive thoughts. And it's like, once you're off that pink cloud, what are you going to do? Yeah.
And a lot of people need to understand that, like, a lot of times with rehab, you kind of just got to go through the motions until that happens. What's the cliche they always say? Don't give up before the miracles happen, or something like that. But
it sounds like something that, like, you know, treatment centers or support groups or whatever just say to keep you there. But it's true.
So true.
It's so true, because a lot of the times, like, okay, well, why do I got to be here for months and months and months? But for me, just having that time away from my last use was critical.
Yeah. And it's like, dude, just chill. Like, just let life happen for a minute. And
well, I got this job being a barista. Yeah. It's like, bro, that'll be there in 2 months. Yeah. You're fine. I had one guy leave treatment because he got accepted at Subway being like a sandwich artist. He called it a sandwich artist one time.
I think that's what they call him.
And I was like, dude, like, what are you doing?
Yeah. Shout out to Subway though.
Yeah. I guess.
Love
Jimmy
Subway.
John's though.
Ooh.
I'm a Jimmy John's guy.
Subway or Jimmy John's?
Or Porta Subs or Jersey Mike's.
Is this turning
Subway's
into
like last.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Is this turning into a sandwich debate?
It's not a debate. I won.
Ernie's in Orem, best sandwiches by far. End of story.
Yeah.
No, just kidding.
But yeah, he left treatment. I still remember his name. I was like, dude, really? But people leave treatment. If you want to be done with treatment, you'll find a reason. Yeah. And if sandwich artist is your reason, more power to you. Yeah. We'll see you again soon.
Yeah.
If you make it back.
Right. if you run out of artistine sandwiches.
Artisan.
Artisine.
Oh.
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know what the... anyways. Okay. Another significant moment for me. And this happened on day 66 of being in rehab. And this is back in 2016 when insurance companies were paying for 90 days of residential treatment, which they don't really do anymore. But for me, I had all these experiences and I was largely just kind of going through the motions, and I was doing assignments and I was making progress and I was participating in groups and, doing all the things that I was supposed to. But at the same time, I was still breaking rules and like engaging in stupid behaviors and just like trying to get away with stuff and like whatever. And so there was several instances where I'd gotten caught doing stuff that I shouldn't be doing in this rehab program and had to get talking to every single time it happened or whatever. And then got written up. I, had to talk with my therapist about it. And, it kind of all came down to this happened on day 66. And it was probably the most significant turning point in my entire recovery story. And what ended up happening was they called me into a clinical meeting, and that's where all the therapists are there, all the techs are there, everybody is there.
It's like getting called to the principal's office. This is big kid stuff.
But it's in the staff meeting. It's not like the client group. It's the staff meeting where they're like,
and like doctors are mad at you.
Yes, yes. And so I go in, they're like, come here, we want to talk to you. So we go in and sit down, and they're like, we don't know what to do with you. Like, half of us want to kick you out. Half of us think you should stay. We want to hear it from you, whether you feel like you should stay or not. And it's like, why? What did I do? And they're like, this one guy jumped in and he was like, you're the fakest client I think I've ever seen. And you've had us all fooled that you were like our favorite client, and we all love you. Don't get me wrong. But like, you're doing all this stuff and you're participating in a group and you're doing all these assignments and whatever. And, we've just always thought, you're doing so good. But like behind the scenes, you're still doing all the same stuff that you've been doing that has gotten you here. Mm-hmm. And you haven't changed, and you're just more sneaky about it than maybe anybody we've ever seen before. And they just kind of ripped into me and were like,
you're like a master manipulator.
Yes. And they're like, you do this, whatever. And so I was like, I'm sorry, like I'll do better, whatever. And they're like, no, we want you to take it to group. And so we left the clinical meeting, went into a process group, and there was probably like 20 or 30 people, other clients in that group. And
it's a big house.
Yeah. And so they pretty much turned the floor over to me, and they're like, Ty, it's all yours. And they're like, catch us up to speed. What are we talking about? And so I kind of put into my own words what was said in the clinical meeting and was like, yeah, I've been, struggling with this, and this. And it was like floodgates opened, and like it was a free for all. And it was pretty much like all these other clients that were there just started chiming in, and they're like, yeah, we've seen you do this and you act like this. And,
dang.
Yeah. And
gotcha.
For me, my whole time, I thought I was everybody's friend, and I thought I was the cool kid in rehab, and, I thought that everybody
isn't like something you want to be.
I know.
You don't want to be the cool kid in rehab.
Know, right? But like I was going through my rehab experience trying to be the cool kid in rehab. And, I thought that I was
probably served you well outside of rehab.
Yes. And like, I thought that I was everybody's friend, and I was smarter than everybody, and I was different than everybody, and like whatever, And it was just like one after another, everybody kind of started chiming in. They're like, yeah, we noticed that like at rec therapy, you just, think you're all hard and you try to go harder than everybody and like whatever, because we'd go play softball, and I played baseball my whole life growing up. And so going and playing softball, to me, it was like going to batting practice, and I can hit a softball pretty good, and but to everybody else that comes across as like, oh, he's showing off, and he thinks he's cool, and
the jock
he
of
can throw
rehab.
hard. Yeah. And but to me it was therapeutic, and I was enjoying myself, And then there was this other client that spoke up, and he was very soft spoken, very quiet, very shy. And he started saying, he's like, you know, I had an experience with you in the kitchen the other day. We were both assigned to help cook dinner for that week or whatever. And he was like, we were in the kitchen, and my job was to prepare the salad bar. And you literally came over to where I was at. You took the knife out of my hands, and you wanted me to cut the lettuce the way that you wanted me to cut the lettuce. And I remembered that experience and that interaction. And my version of the story was, I look over, and he has a romaine head of lettuce, and he's peeling off each individual leaf and then like chopping up each leaf at a time. And so for me, I was like, oh, hey, I'm going to show him a trick. I'm going to help him out. I'm going to be nice. I know how to cut lettuce, so I'm going to teach him something cool, you know? And so I was like, okay, watch, turn it upside down, go down each side of the stems, then you boom, 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 you're done, move on. And, but to him, that's not how it came across. It came across as, you're doing it wrong. You need to do it different. You got to do it my way. I know better than you, whatever, you know?
Controlling.
And so knowing my version of that story in my head and how he was explaining it were two completely different things. And it was just story after story of things, like little dumb examples like that. And
damn,
it was
they got
really,
the whole treatment center against you.
Yes. And it was like, I had never felt more exposed, because everything that they were saying was so spot on.
Yeah.
Nothing they were saying was wrong or incorrect. But it was such an eye-opening experience for me, because it was like, holy crap, like, this is not how I thought that I was being received. Like, I thought I was everybody's friend.
Your perspective was completely
teaching
different.
them stuff, and I was being helpful and whatever. Mm-hmm. But I still had all these behaviors going on that were like not being received the way that it was coming out in my own mind. And so that experience alone put me into this, it was like forced humility, because I was embarrassed, and it was like, I better just shut up and not talk for a minute, because I just felt like I was doing everything completely wrong. And so it really put me into this mode where I was ready to start listening,
eating some humble pie,
instead of like telling everybody else what to do and what to believe about me.
Well, I think that's great, because I think that a lot of people hit that point, that exposed point in treatment, and that's their fight or flight moment. It's that pivotal moment, because that's where people either take it and they say, all right, I'm ready to make a change, or they AMA.
Yeah.
You know, they walk out of treatment. Yeah. They're like, you guys don't know what you're talking about. This is stupid. Why don't, you know, they start picking apart everything, and then they just leave because they're unwilling to see what everyone else sees.
Yeah. So. Give us one more significant experience in rehab for you.
I can't think of any off the top of my head. I mean, I know they're there, but I only had 2 in my mind prepared. I will say one thing. You know, obviously I've been to treatment several times, mm-hmm. but I think that a lot of people assume that it was only the last time that counted. But every time I went through any sort of treatment, every relapse, every re-entry into a program, every hospital visit, detox visit, ER visit, I learned something.
It all started stacking up.
It all started stacking up. And one thing that I'll say to people who come in and they get a taste of recovery, going back out is never the same.
Yeah.
And I remember I went through treatment my first time, and going back out, it wasn't fun at all anymore. Yeah. And I think that treatment and recovery ruins that. And I think for anyone out there that has started to dip their toes in recovery and they're trying to get back into, you know, they've relapsed, they're out there, it's never going to be fun again.
Yeah.
Like, it's gone, it's done. Yeah. So you may as well
start figuring it out.
Come home.
Yeah.
And hopefully you can get this thing, because it'll come.
And hopefully it happens sooner rather than later without
something
causing
bad
any more
happening.
destruction.
Don't quit till the miracle happens. And I think that everyone will have that aha moment that we've talked about today.
Yeah.